Aloha and good afternoon. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from Livestream.travel and eTurbo News in Honolulu. Today we're here for World Tourism Network. For those of you that are not yet a member of the World Tourism Network, please look at WTN.travel and we hope you will join us. World Tourism Network is a new initiative, what emerged out of the rebuilding.travel discussion. We started back in March at ITB Berlin. However, ITB did not materialize, but I think we're one of the very few events during ITB that had a first discussion. We did this in cooperation with PATA at the time. And it emerged now with members in 125 countries. We actually just added another country. We were 124 for a while, and we welcome Russia members. We actually had a few members from Russia joining us. Welcome. And our organization is built to really function from the bottom up. So we have introduced a number of chapters, like our chapter in Greece, like our chapter in the Balkan region in Washington, D.C. And our chapters are really the driving force to discuss issues relevant on a local basis. We can then help to bring on to a global platform, and also to our interest groups. And interest groups are groups that discuss various issues relevant to all of us, members of the travel and tourism industry. For example, in a week from today, we have two discussions in regards to aviation. We're bringing Vijay. Some of you have met during our initial start in December. He was a former VP for Etihad Airways in Abu Dhabi. He's from Mauritius originally, and he lives in Mauritius now. And he is from Mauritius. Let me try to put it again. But he lives in Singapore now and is considered one of the probably most known experts in the aviation industry. We also have a number of very interesting and fun events coming up. On the 19th. We have inauguration date, celebrating the inauguration of the new U.S. President Biden. And we're doing this together with tour guides in Washington, D.C., who will show us around. We'll see how much they can really show us. I understand the city is more like a fortress on the 19th, but we leave it up to our tour guides, and I'm sure they'll find a way around. There's a lot of things coming up. You can just go to worldtourismevents.com and you find what is next. But more important, go to WTN.travel and please join us. We have both complimentary options as an observer, and we have member options, what gives you access to all these different groups and actively participate. I wanted to welcome today Dr. Eleanor Garley. Eleanor has been a good friend, and she's a supporter for eTurbo News, a writer and part of our team ever since we started, I believe, back 20 years ago. I remember her reporting during September 11th in New York, and this was already after we worked with her for some time. And she is known, sometimes not known for lip service, what makes it very interesting. Her reports are widely read, respected, and she's putting a lot of research in anything and everything she's doing. So today, I think we're going to have such a little bit of a controversial discussion. And Eleanor also has a guest, and I think it's better, Eleanor, if you introduce your guest. And I give the platform to you, and we will end with a Q&A like we always do, because we always wanted to make it interactive, and hope you will participate. Welcome, Eleanor.
Well, it's always good to see you, Thomas, and it's always important that eTurbo News is one of the few publications, if not the only publication, in the hotel, travel, tourism industry that actually covers the truth and does not focus on PR or promotions or special events, but is willing to share both the good news and the bad news and the other news of the industry on a global basis. And so has gotten the respect of the world for sharing some of the information that others would like to keep hidden. One of the industries that troubles me the most is the cruise line industry, because they are so non-responsive to the needs of the customer, of the passenger, and certainly ignore the needs and wants of their crew. And so, as a bad actor in the industry and non-responsive to many calls for reform, the cruise industry is always on my hit list. And so, with us today is a wonderfully smart, energetic, high energy, wonderful diplomat in the that works in the cruise industry and is from Alaska. And she has recognized both the good news and the bad news about the cruise industry and its importance to Alaska. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Carla and let her share with us a bit of her background, because she was involved with the Exxon Valdez incident many years ago, and then has moved forward into focusing on the cruise industry and its importance, as well as the challenges that Alaska faces in keeping the cruise line industry as a tourism partner. So, Carla, if you would share with us some of your background, it would be great.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Thomas. Hello from Juneau, Alaska. And I am involved and came to meet Eleanor through the Global Cruise Activist Network. And I'll go back to, I've worked in tourism since I was a young child. I live in a town that's been a popular tourism destination since it was founded in the 1800s. And in the 1980s, the cruise industry was growing in Juneau, but it wasn't so big to take over the town. And I worked as a shore excursion agent with the cruise industry, and then went on to form my own business, guiding people and doing bookings for bed and breakfasts and other small tourism transportation companies as a inbound destination specialist for Alaska, which I did for almost 10 years. And during that time, the Exxon Valdez, which is an oil tanker, hit a reef in Prince William Sound and ruptured the hull and created a massive oil spill. And one of the interesting fallouts from that oil spill was learning that because of very old shipping laws, the tourism industry was not eligible for any form of compensation or reimbursement or holding harmless from the incident. So all of the businesses that were in Prince William Sound that depended on a pristine natural environment to share lost their business, and many of them lost their businesses overall, not just for a couple years, and they received absolutely no compensation of any sort. And out of that, we came together, small tourism operators from all over the state, and formed the Alaska Wilderness Recreation and Tourism Association. And that was just at the nascent stage of what's called ecotourism. And we came together to advocate as businesses for the environment and for small businesses that weren't part of the cruise industry, basically. Fast forward from that, I went on to serve as an appointee from the governor on our state tourism marketing council. So I got to sit on the tourism marketing council with cruise industry executives, and then went on to sell that business as the internet became, the World Wide Web became something. I was easing out of the business at that point. Went on to do other things, and then was working in wildlife tourism with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And through that, tried to reach out to the cruise industry to create some marketing opportunities, or not marketing, to create some opportunities to enhance their wildlife viewing and convert more people who were coming to Alaska into knowledgeable advocates for conservation for wildlife. Even coming from an agency perspective of trying to help them, I was reminded of how the industry is not my friend. And so after that, I just went about my life, and the cruise industry is so prominent in my town. There are 31,000 people who live here. And in 2019, we had 1.3 million cruise ship passengers, plus all of the crew visiting over a 5-month period. So on any day, we have 10,000, 12,000 cruise passengers plus crew in our community doing high impact in terms of being community member activities with helicopters and jet boats and any number of things that disrupt our lives, tons of buses on roads that would otherwise be uncrowded. So in the fall of 2019, I became inspired to try to unite people around the globe. And I'm fascinated to see the WTN because it was a similar thing of we have this communication capacity now with Zoom and we can talk. And so I started organizing people who were in cruise ports around the country and finding people who were concerned about the impacts of cruise tourism. And with COVID, we got a unique opportunity with the industry being stopped to sort of come together and get together. And so through the Global Cruise Activist Network, we've been uniting people from communities all over the world to share our experiences with the cruise industry and with the impacts of the cruise industry on our communities. And I think that sort of brought me to how I came to meet Eleanor.
Yes, because Carla had done a global Zoom meeting where representatives from the cruise industry around the world shared some of their successes and some of the challenges that they currently face. So Carla I think walks, and her organization walks that very fine line between love and hate. Because of this disruption it brings to the community. On the other hand, it leaves behind a revenue that supports an enormous number of small businesses that would not normally have a cash flow and a return on their investment. However, one of the points that Carla has made is the difference between the cruise passenger who comes for a few hours and then gets back on their ship and departs, and the person who comes and stays, and the difference in the contribution that visitor makes to their community. Where is there one that's more important? Is it? I would think that the passenger, the traveler that comes and stays overnight or for many nights makes a bigger contribution to your community than the cruise line does.
Yes, the passengers that come on a short cruise or on a cruise and are there for a short period of time have less of an economic impact on the community, positive economic impact on the community, at the same time that by virtue of them arriving in a flood of people who get off the ship and get back on the ship and leave at the same time, they create a bigger impact on the community than a similar number of people who might be staying in a hotel and going and having a meal at whatever time they like to and going and doing whatever they like to on their own schedule. So that if one hotel or one restaurant is busy, they might walk past and find another restaurant or go and take a walk and then come back. They don't have the same time pressures that cruise passengers do. So cruise passengers create a lot of impact and congestion on a city, which makes it less comfortable and pleasant for both the residents and the people who have come on their own. So people who are overnighting are paying bed taxes, they're buying local products, they're spending enough time to go to the same coffee shop a couple times and say hi and be a familiar face, or to do something that helps them to be a little bit of a part of a community and create some interaction. Whereas cruise ships are there strictly as basically a theme park. The host community is exploited by the cruise line to allow people to come in and to walk around and to sell this destination. But the cruise industry's whole economic model is based on capturing every bit of revenue that they can from each of those passengers. They don't want anything to be spent in the local towns if they have their way. So they have their shopping malls on the ship, they have their specialty restaurants, they have their extra concessions and things. You can go gamble, you can go and have your hair done or have a massage or ride on a roller coaster or whatever. And those all cost extra money. As well, when the cruise ships come, they sell what are called shore excursions. And the shore excursions are oftentimes provided by local businesses. So that's a place, that's their point of contact, with saying that they're bringing money into the local economy, because there are local businesses. And observing in Alaska, they very much cultivate a few, gosh golly, I live here, I'm local businesses, to help them to be very successful and to be their mouthpiece to the community. But in reality, the cruise ships are taking about 100% commission. So if you have a tour that sells for $100, the cruise ship is taking $50 of that for selling the tour. And then the shore excursion operator gets the other $50 from which to pay all of the expenses for the tour, to pay their taxes, to pay their payroll. So right there, you've taken half of the value of what the passengers spend out of the community. The cruise lines also have a habit of, a practice of having preferred shopping system. So people can pay, businesses can pay money to be recommended for shopping. And the implication that the ships make on board is that if it's not a recommended shopping, it might not be credible, you might not get good things, you might get ripped off. So you should only go to the places that they recommend. And so even though they don't own the shops, they're raking a tremendous amount of money off of this business that is happening in the community. So the leakage that goes on, the amount of money that leaves the community from the cruise industry is incredibly high. I've done some calculations in my community of different businesses, and just looking at the leakage of what it costs to operate a business and what comes in and what goes out, and very little sticks in the community. But they make a big deal of pretending that they send these millions of dollars in. But if your bucket has a hole the size of the top and the bottom, not much stays.
What about the destruction of your water and your waterfront, or the deposit, if you will, of the refuse from the ships themselves, seem to pollute the would pollute the waters and kill your flora and fauna in your port cities.
Right. So at the same time that they're crowding people out locally, they also occupy the waterfront zone. And in some ports, that's a traditionally very commercial zone, and maybe it's fine, nobody ever went there anyhow. But in many communities, they want to be in this most beautiful zone. And so our town is spread along the waterfront, and we have not good at international units. We have about a 13 meter height limit for how high a building can be along our waterfront. Well, these ships now tower 12, 13, 14 floors above the water and completely block our view of the water. But because they're ships and not buildings, we don't have any control over it. So basically for 4 months of the year, we look at the side of ships. They block the sun, they block whatever. And they do help to fund some infrastructure that's a beautiful walking path along the pier that the cruise passengers use. But in the winter is the only time that the locals can really go down there and see the water. And that's not the best season for that. And I've seen a couple questions. I'm just looking at the chat, questions about taxes, port taxes and tourist tax. Yes. So port taxes are the fees that the cruise industry adds on to the passenger fee. So they sell a cruise perhaps for an apparently low price, but then the passenger pays a per person fee that's called port taxes and fees generally. And the industry does not share what they include in those port taxes and fees. And in another part of my life, I worked as a researcher for the Alaska State Legislature. And back in 1989, I got asked specifically to investigate what was incorporated into that. And those fees were a lot lower then, but when I investigated, I could not come up with taxes that matched the number, no matter how much I did. So I reached out to the industry representative in Alaska to ask him for help, very naively. And he flew to Juneau from Ketchikan, where he was based, to call me into a meeting with the legislator who asked me for the information to explain that we shouldn't be asking those questions and it was none of our business. If you own a hotel and you think about what you add as taxes and fees onto your hotel, you might have a sales tax or an occupancy tax or a bed tax. As best I can tell, the cruise industry is taking any fee that's shoreside and adding it into that port fees and taxes, because that allows them to have a lower apparent sales price, and they don't pay any travel agent commission on the port taxes and fees. So imagine with your hotel, if you could charge extra to your guests after they book the hotel room, imagine that you could add on an allocation for your water bill, for your electric bill, for your sewer bill, for your property taxes, for anything that you have to pay to the government or to a utility to run your hotel. Imagine that you externalized all of those costs and then lumped them together in some fee that nobody could really know what they were, and maybe added a bit extra for your effort, and then just added that onto the price of your hotel room. That's essentially what they're doing with the port taxes and fees, is that in addition to some actual government taxes and fees, as best I can tell, what they're doing is externalizing all of the costs that they possibly can to give a lower apparent sales price and avoid paying commission on those costs.
And what about the water pollution?
Water pollution. Yes, I'm sorry. Back to the water pollution. Yes. So water pollution has been a big issue for Alaska. We value our clean water, and our wild fishery is one of our foundations of our economy. And the cruise industry has had a bad reputation for ages. In the 60s, when I was a child and there were only a couple of small ships, but they were going by, it was regular that you would find trash on the shore that had a ship name on it or something. They just threw stuff off. That obviously is illegal now, but the ships have continued. Now they're floating cities, 5,000, 7,000 people cities transiting, and they're good at externalizing all of the costs that they can. And so they don't want to invest in the space and the money on a ship to treat the water to the maximum possibility, because they could build a roller coaster or a casino instead. So they had been polluting our waterways. And in 1998 or 99, Royal Caribbean Line got caught dumping dry cleaner fluids and other wonderful things into our waterways, and got a substantial fine from the US government. And that was the first time that a cruise line had really been busted. But it turns out they've been doing this and are doing it all over the world. They have things called, or have been caught with things called magic pipes, where they have they can bypass the monitoring equipment. So they'll send their pollution out a pipe that isn't monitored, and then they hide that pipe when there are inspections from the government. So
A problem with air pollution, where they're not filtering out the air when it's released into the environment. Are you seeing those problems as well? And I would think that Alaska should be noted for its clean air.
yes, yes. So we absolutely see the air pollution as well. The cruise ships burn for the most part. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, the cruise ships are burning what is called bunker fuel, and it's high sulfur. and it's the sludge at the bottom of the oil refinery processing. So they can buy it for very cheap. It's a very, very dirty fuel and puts out a lot of particulates as well as sulfur and all sorts of other pollutants. Globally, ships were required to move to low sulfur fuel, and the shipping industry managed to create a loophole by allowing them to burn the same dirty fuel but use what they call scrubbers. And the scrubbers are removing many of the pollutants from the air, but that accumulates inside of the scrubber as a mess of stuff. And it has to go somewhere. And so they have what's called an open loop scrubber. So they take the pollution out of the air and then they wash it and flush it into the ocean. So we're not breathing it, but the marine life is all living in it. And so that's continues to be an issue. And again, an example of how they externalize their costs.
Have you had the opportunity to speak on any regular basis with the executives of the various cruise line industries that visit your city?
No, the executives themselves don't come to my city. Once in 1999, after Royal Caribbean got in so much trouble, the top executive came to our community for a bit of an apology tour. But that's the only time in 40 years of watching that I've ever seen the highest level executive in our community. They are not available and do not communicate with us. They have organizations and people that speak for them and are really not accessible to the public.
So there's really there's no controls and there's no pressure that the community or the state can put on the cruise lines to make them behave in a more sensitive, humane, sustainable fashion.
The cruise industry has developed using the most advantageous laws of any country they can find. So you have companies that are headquartered in the United States. Their executives live in the United States. Most of their passengers come from the United States. About 80% of the cruise market now, I think, is US sourced. That's declining some with the growing Asian and European markets, but it's mostly US based now. The ships are generally licensed or registered in Panama, Liberia, Bermuda or Bahamas. I'm sorry, and I see Bermuda right in front of me. I'm not sure which, Bahamas or Bermuda. But they're registered
Bahamas.
Thank you. Sorry to blame it on Bermuda. They're registered as what are called flags of convenience. And so they avoid registering in countries that have stringent laws relating to the environment, to worker rights or safety. And then the companies themselves are registered in other countries as well. And so often you'll have a US-based company with ships registered in one country and their corporation registered in another. And this allows them to avoid paying taxes anywhere, to pick the easiest rules to follow for whatever level of whatever they're trying to do. So if you're trying to control like water quality in Alaska, we did a citizen initiative. I wasn't directly involved in organizing that initiative, but there was a citizen initiative on the state level that imposed some very strict water quality standards, some air quality standards, put some taxes on, created a thing called an Ocean Ranger, or a program called Ocean Ranger, which put ships engineers who were working for the state of Alaska onto the ships to be our eyes and ears to see what was going on. And that was paid for as part of the passenger taxes and fees. So we added that on to the taxes and fees that were paid, so it was self-funded. The industry is very powerful and very skillful at using their power. And in Alaska, after you do a citizen initiative, The legislature can't mess with it for 2 years, but after that, they can change or undo anything that you did. And so piece by piece, they've basically been taking away most of what we did. That's good. They rolled back our standards for the water quality because the industry said that it wasn't feasible. They reduced the taxes that we had them paying. So you can do some things on a local basis, but it's hard.
And maybe if I can come in here to also make it a little bit more interactive. We have a few people that are asking questions, and I would prefer, if it's okay, that these participants actually can do it live, so we see them, and go back. And of course, thanks for Cordell for clarifying Bahamas and Bermuda. Cordell was a guest on our show. We had a very, very good discussion on Bermuda, and I used Bermuda as an example how to actually go through the COVID crisis quite safely. But that's for another thing. Welcome. Thanks for participating, Cordell.
And Bermuda does have the whole P&O fleet registered in Bermuda, actually.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we have some, and mostly we have the some of the cruise tankers, some of the tankers, but we do have some cruise ships, yes.
Most of the P&O fleet.
Yeah. Okay, we had Isong Sukpang, and I probably pronounced it wrong, but Isong, you had a question. Maybe if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask this question directly. Can you hear us, Isong? Maybe the microphone doesn't play, but he's asking, please let me know cruise policies of cancellation or suspension, refund and future cruise credit possibility. And I don't know if this is something you can answer, but this I think was Isong's question.
I can only speak to it from the perspective with the Global Cruise Activist Network. We did put together a little video and suggestions on cruise tourism and COVID, and basically a rethink before you rebook. And the analysis that some of the GCAN members with financial background have done is that basically right now the cruise industry is running what appears to be a Ponzi scheme. They continue taking bookings as long as they can on cruises that they're quite certain that they're going to cancel, or maybe they know absolutely that they're going to cancel. And then they're offering these future cruise credits, and then it's this rolling game of cruise credits and whether or not you'll ever get your money back or how you'll get your money back. So you definitely want to read all the fine print on booking cruises and what they're doing with the cruise credits, because it is a Ponzi scheme, basically. They're using your money to pay back the next people or to pay their operating expenses while they're shut down.
Okay. And
if I might say something, being a travel advisor and booking quite a lot of cruises, when the COVID started, a lot of my clients who had booked cruises, they wanted refund. And what had happened, a few of them, they said, you know what, keep the money, because what the cruises were offering, the cruise lines were offering, they were giving a little more than what was paid, and they called for future cruise travel. And so instead of giving 100% refund, what they were doing, if you opted to take the future cruise travel credit, they would give you 125% back, but for you to travel again. But they are giving refunds because a lot of my clients did get refunds, and I made sure of that.
But it's a challenge. It's not an easy process to get your money back.
They didn't have a problem
it's
with
been
me.
a good idea to, and I just read that cruises have been postponed until May of this year, and they'll probably be suspended even further because they refuse to deal with their real life issue of the HVA system. There's just no way that they're going to be able to clean that up until the pandemic is over. Even Fauci said when asked about the air quality, and he said, before you think about taking a cruise, think about catching COVID in a prison or in a other congregate care facility. That's the likelihood of getting sick. And even before COVID, people were getting sick from the flu and other illnesses that were found easily on board because of low sanitation and bad HVA systems. So you do take your health into a risky space when you decide to take a cruise.
And Ellen, and everyone who wanted to ask a question, of course, you can put it in your chat, but it's easy actually if you raise your hand, then we see it and we can give you the microphone. I'd like to give the microphone to Jennifer Ashley. Jennifer, tell us where you're from and what your question is.
Okay, I'm from Maryland, and I've done 120 something cruises so far. I've probably cruised every single cruise ship you can think about. I'm a VIP on all these different ships, and I never had a problem. Never ever had a problem. Now I have booked. I'm also a travel advisor, and I booked big groups, and I had no problem getting the money back. For the clients that want their money back, there was absolutely no problem. They got the money back right away. And the ones that wanted the future cruise credit, they got back, well, I postponed them. I put them for another cruise whenever they wanted to cruise. But on their documents, it showed that they will get that money as a future cruise credit. I've never had a problem with that. And that's just, you know, I just wanted
to I do hear from reading the groups online that are talking, consumers talking about the credits and the refunds, that those who have worked through a good travel agent are having the best go of it.
Yeah.
We have Benita Lubick had a comment or a question. Benita, where are you calling us from?
I'm calling from Washington, D.C.
Welcome.
And I have two questions. First of all, can Juneau and the ports in Alaska restrict the number of ships coming to Juneau in the future? And how is life now during the pandemic?
Yeah, so those two relate a little bit, because in the summer of 2020, even though the weather was really horrifically cold and wet all summer long, we had the town to ourselves for the first time since 1970s. And it was delightful. The trails were so busy, the beaches, everywhere that we could be outside recreating, because that was the thing, is the thing to do during the pandemic. So people got to experience Juneau without the crowds, and I think they were quite delighted with what they found. Whether or not a community can restrict the cruises is a lot of controversy, and the industry has pushed really hard all of this time to put out the word that we cannot. They tell us what they're doing. They tell us they'll be there or they won't, and we're to have no say in it. And a lot of communities, including mine, have bought into that to a large extent. Key West just passed 3 initiatives last fall or November, limiting the size of ships that can visit, the number of people who can come off of the ships into the town each day, and then prioritizing by environmental records what ships will be able to call. And they did that based in part on the capacity of Key West to deal with cruise passengers if there were any pandemic-related, COVID-related illnesses. And so they have taken that step of limiting passengers. They also, some years ago, prohibited the dredging, which would have allowed bigger ships to come in. So that's under lawsuit right now, and a bill has been introduced into the Florida legislature to ban local communities from being able to take that control. Here in Juneau, we are starting work on some initiatives that would have the effect of limiting cruise passengers. We'll see how we end up deciding to do it based on some legal issues and analysis and what happens with Key West. But it's easiest to do only if you don't allow the infrastructure to be built to allow them to come.
Carla,
Jürgen,
does the cruise line buy any local produce, excuse me, or food and beverage from the local producers? Any fish or poultry or beef? Are there any raw materials that are supplied by people from Alaska
Yeah.
that are actually utilized by the ship?
We're a seafood producer, so they do buy seafood. When you say poultry or anything else, we have a number of breweries in Alaska now, and I expect that they buy some Alaskan beer or other beers, possibly from Alaska. There's some weird rules with wholesale sales that they might buy Alaska products in Seattle. I don't know, but we don't really produce in terms of a lot of other things. They buy through local distributors, but they don't actually
buy directly from the producer.
We just don't have very many producers that are producing anything except for fish. And I see Ron Peck. Is that Ron Peck of Alaska?
Hi, Carla.
Hi. Yes, indeed.
Hi, Ron.
Jürgen, can I come in on the Caribbean side of things, because it's the most impacted region in the world.
Yeah, sure.
It's Robert McClellan.
I don't know, Ron. You want to come in first, or you wanted to?
Yeah, I'll just be real brief.
Okay.
I just wanted to embellish what Carla said about the air and water standards. In addition to the port taxes, the state of Alaska receives somewhere in the vicinity of $36 per passenger, which nets out somewhere between $45 to $50 million annually from the cruise industry. And Carla's exactly right what she said with respect to produce. The state of Alaska just doesn't produce enough, whether it's chickens, carrots, or celery, but they do buy a substantial amount of fish produce. And as Carla said, I believe they're buying product such as Alaskan amber beer and other craft beers in Seattle, because that's where they must make the purchase. I did have one quick question, Carla, and that is, do you know, are the monitors, the what we used to call
Ocean
the cruise,
Rangers?
are they still on board? And I'll get off.
The Alaska Ocean Ranger program still exists on statute. Our current governor defunded that program. So even though it's a self-funded program that's funded by a fee assessed to cruise ship passengers, the governor did not appropriate that money to fund the Ocean Rangers. So 2020 would have been our first summer without Ocean Rangers, but it was also our first summer without cruise ships. So we'll see what happens when cruise ships return.
I think Robert had a comment or question, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I agree 100% with our friend from Juneau, and everything that she's saying. I've written articles for the last 20 years on the situation in the Caribbean, and we still have the same problem, really, that the politicians, some would say, are bought and paid for with some free cruises, but none of the politicians will really right the wrongs of heavy taxation on the hotels and on the airline tickets, as opposed to the miserably low port taxes payable in the Caribbean. And it's also very difficult to really get that conversation just generally in the public sector to look at what is really unfair competition also in terms of hotel development. These mega cruise ships cost about $300,000 per cabin, $300,000 per cabin to build, whereas a hotel in the Caribbean costs about $550,000 to build. The cruise ships have a double high season, Caribbean and Alaska, Caribbean and the Med. And so it is very difficult for the hotel industry to compete with that in the Caribbean. But the politicians remain silent, and it's really difficult to get the whole issue in the public domain to be talked about in a meaningful manner.
Yeah.
The business model has changed radically. I was 3 years on board with P&O and Princess Cruises as a hotel officer, straight out of hotel school. I was the vice president hotel services for 4 Explorer cruise ships going back 30 years. The business model then was a reasonable partner for the islands or for Alaska. Now, as you've said, it's so aggressive, it leaves nothing ashore, it takes everything on board. 82% of the discretionary spend of a cruise ship passenger today is on board. Used to be 10% commission when I was in the business, now 50% commission on shore excursions. It's ridiculous, and they're still getting away with it. They've got great PR, they've got great influence in Washington. Maybe the new government, I know a lot of the Democratic Party are looking at this issue very seriously. They're raping the country. I mean, all the money is offshore. All the money comes from the States. I think Carnival Cruise Line paid Uncle Sam total $84 million in the last fiscal year.
Robert, where are you from? Are you from Florida? Or?
Well, no, we're based in the Caribbean. We have a hotel development consultancy across all of the islands. We've got 5 hotels under construction at the moment for clients. But the today's cruise line industry is a major competitor factor. It'd be better to get more hotels built, keep that money in the islands. The stay over visitor, as everybody's just said, is a massive contributor per capita compared to the cruise ship passenger today.
Interesting comments. We have KK Malik from India. Wanted to come in.
Jugan sir, a very good morning as per Indian time.
Good morning.
Am I audible? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, we can see you well.
Warm greetings to all of you. Every time I try to attend your online program, today's discussion is very important. Not the question, it's asking to directly Carla ma'am. Ma'am, welcome. As a short and independent filmmaker, I want to protect some documentaries regarding that, because the pandemic situation is still going on throughout the world. Some countries are in better position, and some countries they are try to rebuild their tourism industry. I have not much more experience, but as an independent filmmaker, I want to create some documentaries and short creation, how it can be possible for the development. I have some suggestion, I have some development ideas. How can I share with you people? If it will be better if you kindly messages your organization's contact details like that. Can it possible?
Well, let me just jump in here. For World Tourism Network, all our members have a profile page. It's actually easily sorted by countries. So if you're a member of WTN, you can easily go to our directory and you find out where everyone is. We also have interest groups. So if your interest is cruise, as your interest is aviation, click on the interest groups. You find all the members and you find contact information for all the members. And if you want to contact us directly at WTN, simply click on contact. You can send us a message, or you can schedule a call, a Zoom call, a private call, and we'd be happy to talk to you. We're really a member organization working with members. When it comes to eTurbo News, kind of the same. We don't have a profile for every reader, obviously, but click on contact and you can easily, we love to talk to our readers and to everyone, and we like to help wherever we can help.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much. I give it back to Eleanor.
Are there anything, other areas that you would like to touch on, Carla, before we wind this up?
Actually, Ron is raising a hand here. Just want to remind, sorry, I didn't see that.
Am I waiting for Ron?
Wait for Ron.
I just wanted to add one additional, based on what the gentleman from the Caribbean said. And I think it indicates the difference in Alaska in terms of the destination. The largest hotelier in terms of number of hotel rooms in the state of Alaska is a cruise line. One of the largest providers of transportation, ground transportation and rail working with the Alaska Railroad, is a cruise line. So probably somewhere in the vicinity of 300 to 400,000 people actually take a land tour and spend more time in Alaska because of the cruise line. I'm just trying to present that as an overall picture. It's a little bit different operation because it's 5 months, as Carla so correctly stated. But there are other pieces or components of the Alaska cruise trade that are very unique.
I wish it were so run in the Caribbean, but that's it's the antithesis situation really in the Caribbean. It's totally exploitive of very small, weak economies.
Oh, Robert, that's where Ron and I, who've known each other since we worked at Alaska Airlines together 40 years ago. We go way back. Anyhow, Ron and I have some different view of that. Princess and the shore-based aspect of the cruise industry that we have is another example of the vertical integration of the cruise industry. If there's an opportunity for them to own an aspect that allows them to capture more money from the passengers, they will. And so basically, Princess owning the lodges and owning all of that infrastructure, rather than setting those people loose when they get to Alaska to stay in a small locally owned hotel or a local infrastructure, is again keeping them within that Carnival brand revenue stream. Their transportation is with the revenue stream. They eat at the hotels or the restaurants that are owned by the revenue stream, and they stay in the hotels. So to me, that's not an advantage. It's not something that's necessarily great for Alaska. And we don't even have the employees to staff that. So the employees come in from overseas or from down south. The taxes, and to look at this, it'll be different in every community or every country around the world. But in the United States, there's an old shipping law that says that the taxes have to be used in association with the passengers or something. The industry managed to get the law further strengthened by Alaska's Congressman Don Young. And so now we actually aren't allowed to spend the revenues that come in from the head taxes or the $36 passenger fee that the state of Alaska charges. Those revenues have to be spent directly on services to the passengers or ships. So if we did not have those passengers or ships, we would not have those expenses. And so it's not as if that money comes in that's excess to the cost of providing the services to the industry so that we can use that to help support our schools or to do anything foundational for our communities. That money comes in and must be spent on things that directly provide directly serve the cruise passengers or industry. And so in a sense now, I introduced the first head tax bill in Juneau, Alaska. Mine failed, passed 2 years later by somebody else. But our intent was that that money would come in and at least we would receive some compensation for giving up so much of our town and having all the noise and the traffic and the impacts. Maybe we could have better parks or do something. But that's not how it is. That money is now being spent in large part to build infrastructure that many of us don't even want, that displaces us from some place that we used to use. So it didn't have the benefits that we expected.
Carla, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the Caribbean, the cruise lines have made poverty-stricken governments pay for very expensive, huge, ever bigger docks, ports. Same problem. It's a clever but vicious circle.
Carla, we have two more comments here, and I think one, Jennifer, if okay, I give you the microphone. Evan said he doesn't have access to microphone, so I'm going to read what he says. He says, are there any distinctions between exhibition cruise companies and the mega cruise companies?
Yeah, so the expedition cruises, the smaller cruise lines, tend to do turnarounds on the Alaska cruise run. The expedition ships have a much better chance of being an American, a US flagged ship, which means that they have American employees on board. The ship was built in the United States, and they oftentimes do turnarounds within Southeast Alaska ports, and their passengers actually fly in and may spend a night or two in a hotel before or after the cruises. They're smaller, and so they have less of an impact. And I think there's a general support for smaller cruise ships in Southeast Alaska, even amongst people who have concerns about the big ships.
No,
So-
Carla, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, I think I missed part of the question.
Oh, okay. It says that he wanted to know if there's any distinctions, it's a difference from the issues you discussed earlier about expedition cruise companies and the mega cruise companies.
Right. So the expedition cruise companies that visit Alaska, in general, you can actually talk to somebody who's involved in management. A couple of the expedition cruise companies are owned by people who live in Alaska, so you can find them. I think they have more connection to the community and more connection to the land, and so more concern about treating it better. The mega cruise companies, I equate them to mining companies and extractive resources. They come in to take what they can, and when the vein of riches runs out, whether it's we have an oil spill and it's not attractive or whatever the case, then they leave again. And all of the money and all of the infrastructure that has been constructed here is just left for the community to deal with. So I personally, from my 35 years or so of dealing with the big cruise industry and looking at it as a resident, I don't find anything good about them being in your community.
Have the cruise line has the crew or passengers had any demands on your healthcare system? Do you find that they take advantage of your healthcare system while they're there, even though it's only a short amount of time?
Well, this is America, so there's nothing to take advantage of in our healthcare system in the sense that they get charged for everything. But yes, we have a small community regional hospital, and our hospital hires extra staff, extra doctors in the summer, specifically because of the impacts of the cruise industry. Our city operates our ambulance service, and our city has one ambulance specifically dedicated to the cruise industry during the summer. And there's a steady supply of coffins flying out of Alaska in the summer from people who pass away on the cruise ship. So yeah, it definitely impacts our community, and I expect you've seen the same in the Caribbean. When I ran a bed and breakfast reservation service and booked for a whole bunch of bed and breakfasts, the cruise line agencies in town loved to, when things were really busy, they loved to call and book their passenger that one person was in the hospital, the couple were getting off. They loved to call and book them into a bed and breakfast because they knew that bed and breakfast would be compassionate and human. And basically they dump these people. This person's spouse just died or is in the hospital or whatever. And they basically just dump the people onto the local community to deal with, knowing that we will respect and care about the individual person. But it's just externalizing, again, the costs of everything that they do.
Wait till somebody dies on the gangway, they'll push them ashore pretty quick.
I expect so.
And we had Jennifer Ashley wanted to make a comment. Jennifer, can you unmute yourself? Or maybe Jennifer doesn't have a microphone, so let me just read what she said. Jennifer said, Robert, I agree with you, but one of the advantages in the cruise line visit, that a cruise line visits more than one country in a week in some groups, like in other groups. Then we have the group that wants to fly to one country and stay for a week. That's her comment, I think, to Robert's.
Yes, no, I accept that the cruises are very good for certain people who want to see multiple islands. The problem is the cruise line industry lies and says you can expect 20% of these people to come back for stay over vacations, and the number is more like 0.2%. So again, it's an exploitive model that really contributes very little in the long term. Didn't used to be like that. Used to be a fair partner. The business model now is totally vicious. In the last 30 years, from when I last ran cruise ships, which were expedition ships, 4 in number, as a VP hotel services, the business model has transformed utterly. And politicians don't seem to recognize that, and the poor local in Main Street doesn't seem to have recognized that in the islands, and it's very difficult to really get that message out. I think Alaska's done a much better job of really trying to get a more equitable scenario.
I'm just wondering, one thing is about the Jones Act, probably not a big issue in the Caribbean because you have so many different countries. But Alaska is part of the United States. Jones Act forbids transportation for foreign-owned and foreign-built ships
sail out of
between U.S.
Vancouver.
ports.
Yeah,
so you go to Vancouver, okay.
Yeah, or
okay,
Prince Rupert on the way up, which is still in Canada. So that gets around the Jones Act.
Okay.
Yeah, they also managed to get an exemption from Congress that allowed them to base in Seattle. And so about 20, 30 years ago, they moved a lot of their cruises to Seattle, and they just have to make a port of call in a Canadian port. And that's where the poor Port of Victoria is getting hammered with these mandatory cruise stops that are required by law, but they're really only going and stopping for about 3 hours in order to meet the law, but anchoring right at a neighborhood and causing all sorts of congestion and pollution on the neighbors when there's really little return. But the one-way cruise ships, if you want to go one way from Vancouver up to do the land tours and get off in Alaska, then you need to sail from Vancouver. If you're doing a round trip Alaska cruise, as long as they stop in a Canadian port. Of course, Canada's ban of travel because of COVID right now is the first thing that put the death spike into the 2020 Alaska cruise season. I think it would have been gone anyhow, but.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any significant increase in crime as a result of the cruises visiting your city? Are the passengers or the crew increasing crime in your locale?
I don't know that that's happening. I think that you have more people in the community, and that might attract more people who are interested in trying to find an opportunity for easy pickings, but I don't think that's really been an issue. It's nothing that I've heard of.
Well, we're now about 10 minutes over time. That means everyone really enjoyed the session. And obviously we're not here to bash the cruise industry, but we're trying to get some truth and the other side of the cruise industry also out here. Everyone in this business, including the cruise industry, now are living in a different reality. We're all hurting, no matter how much money there is. And I think all of us agree we need to somehow bring this travel and tourism industry together. And I can sense this has to be done, and it's very important to do this in a responsible way. And obviously, hopefully, the cruise industry will be on the table to discuss how they can be part of have part of this responsibility. But Eleanor, I give you, and then of course, Carla, the last word. Before I go, I wanted to remind everybody, this is live, but after the live broadcast, you can see the archive on livestream.travel. And then you can also see a lot of our other events that we had in the past. And if you wanted to sign up and participate in any future event, as I said, we have the inauguration party coming up on the 18th, and we have our discussion on aviation coming up next week. Just go to worldtourismevents.com. And more important is join WTN.travel as a member, and we will also notify you by email. And actually, you might even be interested in having your own event in the future. WTN.travel. And of course, last not least, and the most important part is continue to read eturbonews.com. You can find us also on Travel News Online or .online. But I wanted to wish everyone a nice evening, nice morning. Aloha from Hawaii, and handing over for the last word for Eleanor and Carla.
Well, once again, Thomas, I appreciate of your channels of distribution, if you will, to share the truth and the realities of the industry. Unfortunately, I have not been able to get any of the cruise line PR people or executives to respond to any of the myriad of stories that I've written about the industry. And I'm sure that some of them have even blocked my email because they just don't want to deal with the reality. Hotels, destinations, restaurants, all important parts of the tourism industry have tried to their best under most circumstances and limited financial resources to address COVID by bringing in new technology and robots and new surfaces and new fabrics and new design, and putting in new HVA systems and trying to respond to the demands of our new world. Unfortunately, the cruise line people are silos. They are strong, they are tough, they are financially secure, and they do as they please. And that's really sad, since they are and could be an important part, and even more important partner in the tourism industry. So I'm just going to give the last word to Carla and to tell us where and how to find more information on our organization.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you. This has been really fun, and to meet this organization, because grassroots sort of is my passion. The Global Cruise Activist Network is at globalcruiseactivistnetwork.com. And there we have principles of responsible cruise tourism and a number of other resources. We're still a new organization. We really launched in September. So we're just like you, new, and haven't gotten quite as big as you as fast, but working away with a bunch of volunteers. So globalcruiseactivistnetwork.com. And I urge people to, if you do book cruises and such, have people consider the impacts of their choices that they're making, because we're looking in Juneau, if we're not successful in imposing limits on the cruise industry through an initiative process, really what the industry is leaving us as the last option that we have is to make the guests of the cruise industry feel not welcome, so that the cruise industry will stop coming. And that's something that none of us in the port communities want to do. We appreciate the individual people and don't want to harm them, but if the cruise industry leaves us no other option, then really what will be left to do is to tell the passengers that they are not welcome. And I don't think the industry quite grasps that in the end, they are depending on our communities for hospitality. And in the end, we can have the final say on whether or not they're welcome. So if they're choosing not to deal with us, then it could just become uncomfortable for everyone as we legally, lawfully, politely say you're not welcome here. And I hope that it doesn't come to that, because we'd love to see the people come and stay over in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, again. And good night. Good morning. Bye-bye.
Bye.